Hello, this is Pat Lynch, and you are listening and watching As the World Turns or Burns. Joining me, as always, is
Kieran O'Keefe
and
Brendan Connell, PhD.
I'm
trying to get some variety into the introduction.
Okay,
so.
and
Doctor
and 2028 presidential candidate. If you saw our last show, there was a formal announcement. And behind the board, in the shadows, but always ever present, is
Russ.
Okay, it's just Russ now, not Big Russ.
I just
You keep me always on edge, but
too many nicknames.
what?
Too many nicknames.
Well, indeed, but thank you, Russ. What we wanted to talk about is that last episode we were kind of going over just this little thing called Iran, and just here it is. It's a war not approved by Congress. It goes, all of a sudden just turns the entire world upside down, and it's all the actions of a president that just feels that he has unlimited executive power. And so the whole thing is, when you start putting all these things together, call it an unconstitutional war, just all the different things that are just skirting the Constitution, breaking the laws, break, and we're beyond just the real trite stuff about breaking norms. Are we at a point that impeachment is something that should be discussed? And I guess you could call up the 25th Amendment also, but I mean, I wanted to throw it to both you guys. Is impeachment something that we can talk about at this point?
Sure, we can talk about it, but it's not going to happen. I mean, it's kind of like impeachment is one thing. The conviction is never going to happen.
Right.
The conviction thing is like talking about Santa Claus or something. It's not going to happen. Like, there's no viable pathway to convicting him in the Senate. You would need, even if the Democrats win back the Senate, so they win 51 seats, they would need to flip 16 Republican senators to vote for conviction. That means you need to get Republican senators in deep red states to convict him, which is simply not going to happen. Yeah. There's no pathway forward for that. People say the 25th Amendment almost like that's more realistic or something, but I think it's actually less realistic, because you would need both the vice president and the majority of the cabinet, who's totally full of loyalists, Trump lackeys, to vote to kick him out, and then Congress have to vote on it. I mean, I think it's a 2/3 majority in Congress at that point. Yeah. So the 25th Amendment is even less possible, but it's not going to happen. There's no pathway forward to it. If you were to ask me, has Trump done enough that he should be impeached and removed from office, I would say yes. Yeah. I said that last year when he was trying to evade some of the court rulings. To me, that was enough then. There's been a lot more since then. You talk about the Iran war. You could talk about, I mean, it's hard to even, the corruption aspect of it, the use of ICE as a paramilitary force. I think there are lots of different ways you could find him guilty of high crimes and misdemeanors. But unfortunately, impeachment is the main mechanism for controlling an out-of-control president by removing him or her. And unfortunately, it's totally broken. It just doesn't work anymore.
Oh, Brendan.
In which case, it would be just sort of political theater. And I don't know if that's really in the interest of the Democrats. Right. I would just try to win in the court of public opinion. There's midterm elections coming up. I think there's a lot of things that are working against the Republicans. Probably first and foremost now is just the price of oil. And that is probably the current administration's doing with the war in Iraq, or war in Iran. And so, I don't know. I don't know if I would go the route of trying to start the impeachment process, because I think we saw how that kind of played out last time. And I think that it's going to not really lead to anything. So in which case, I would just kind of focus on winning back part of Congress, at least in the 2026 midterms. And then obviously 2028 is coming up soon. So
crazy talk, but could there be, I won't call it a coup, but that somewhere the military kind of steps up and just says that we just can't do this anymore, and you have, Trump talking about the talk that he's doing, even just even the whole war in Iran, and as far as going in without really sound objectives, and the military's executed perfectly. I mean, well, to throw Venezuela in there too. So I mean, the military's been executing perfectly, but when is it at a point that they just have to start to push back? I mean, you got Hegseth, totally unqualified. He's out there trying to recreate the Crusades and this, and he's at the head, just bloviating. He just denied 4 one-star generals. For promote. 4 enlisted that were to be one-star generals that were basically because they were black and female. Nothing else seems to be there. And then all the firing that he's had, and it's like, is there some point where the military just says, yeah, enough? Enough's enough, and that the country's just going in the wrong direction, because we still have 3 more years of Trump doing whatever impulsively he wants to do.
I think the military refusing orders from the civilian authority is a dangerous step. I would not. Yeah. I don't think that's a direction we want to go down, because you set that precedent, and then you're setting a precedent in the future. The military does not have to listen to the civilian authorities who are elected. So I hope that we don't come to that. Ideally, I mean, Trump will back off a little bit. But if he gets some blowback from military advisors who are telling him what he's doing is crazy, but it's dangerous, I think, to have the military playing a role politically like that, because that's the military is really active in. If you look at a lot of unstable countries, the military plays a lot of weight in who's in power and who's not in power, and I don't want to go anywhere near down that route. But what is dangerous is a couple things. One is, you kind of alluded to this, but there's been kind of a purge almost, where there's been this elimination of, I suppose, people they think in the military, high-ranking individuals who aren't sufficiently MAGA or loyal to Trump. Yeah. So there's that. And I also think, too, if you were to survey the military, my guess, and I don't know this for sure, but I'm pretty confident, is that people in the military, on average, probably have a better view of Trump than people who are not in the military. That would be my guess. Yeah. I think, especially among probably the lower-ranking parts of the military, some of the senior leadership, people who went to West Point Naval Academy, probably a little more skeptical of Trump. But if you look at the demographic that makes up so the enlisted men and women in the military, that's kind of the demographic that's going to be more MAGA a lot of the time. So I think the sense of the military be this bulwark against Trump, I'm not sure about that. Maybe, but I'm not sure about that.
Yeah, civilian control of the military is pretty vital for democracy and maybe good governance in general. So in terms of what could the military do, though, short of just refusing orders, I don't know, if there was that level of discontent in the military, maybe you get some people that resign and then they go public and they start talking about what they disagree with, and that that might affect things in maybe a backdoor way. But
conceivably, though, there's a likelihood Trump would place an order. Okay, I want the desalination plant in Tehran blown up. I've had it. They haven't opened the strait. They're just drop the bombs now. And so it seems that they're going to drop the bombs, but that's why I just wonder if there is a point where they have to just say no.
I guess it comes down to the person in that position. I don't even know what I would do in that position. I mean, if you're following orders, you're listening to Commander-in-Chief per the Constitution. Yeah,
but then you're me lie. That's kind of what it seems to me. I agree completely that if the military exerts greater power in this democracy, that this democracy's fundamentally changed for the worse. But when do how many times have we said that it's starting to smell and feel like an autocracy here in the U.S.?
Well, I think it's a little concerning in some ways too. This is more of a bigger picture thing, but if you look at most institutions in American life, whether it be the media, different parts of government, state government, I'd say the public institution, at least, that the average American would favor the most, or the highest regard for, is the military.
Yeah.
And in some ways, you might say, okay, well, that's fine. These are individuals who are sacrificing their lives, in theory, for the good of the whole nation, putting their livelihoods on the line. But there is like a danger to that, where if the military is elevated so much in public opinion and the government is much lower, I don't know, that seems risky to me. If that could be threatening to democracy if you have the really high regard for the military and very low regard for civilian government. Yeah, to me, that can undermine democracy in the long run.
Well, because then how easy is it to do martial law? That's kind of where militaries really start to kick in.
Yeah, I mean, Brendan knows more about this than me, but you look at a lot of the dictators around the world. What are their origins? They're generals, at least some kind of military officer, and they have the support of the public because of the elevation of the military. Yeah. Civilian leaders are incompetent. Who takes power? I'm the military guy. I'll take power. I'll fix things.
Yeah,
and then you end up with a military dictatorship. I'm not saying we're there. I think the elevation of the military and the complete denigration of other institutions in society, to me, is not an auspicious sign for the future.
Yeah, the more probable and less extreme thing of what'll happen as a negative consequence is the military is granted more influence in policy making. And I guess we could debate this, but I mean, generally, I think the military is a more hawkish actor than, let's say, diplomats in the State Department.
Yeah.
I'm not saying everyone in the military is like a warmonger, but it's what they're trained to do. I mean, they're trained to kind of think about solutions as, using weaponry. So
what is it now? Like maximum lethality, or my brain hurts repeating some of that warrior ethos. It's
whatever Hegseth was saying. Yeah. So.
And it's already begun to erode somewhat the civilian control of the military, because the Secretary of Defense, per 1947 National Security Act or around there, the Secretary of Defense is supposed to be a civilian, or if they were military, they're supposed to be retired for, I believe, 10 years. And the past, so I think 3 presidents, we've had waivers passed by Congress to say it's okay to have someone basically come out of the military and start serving as Secretary of Defense. Mm-hmm. And both parties have done this, in part because, we trust the military. But also, I know Trump's first term, it was like the adults in the room hypothesis. It's like, let's bring in a military general and maybe he'll talk some sense into this dude so that he doesn't do something bad. So, but that's like a norm that has been pretty much gone now. I don't think in the future we'll continue to see probably secretaries of defense that are coming from the military. So,
well, then it leads to a question in the 2028 Connell administration. How's this going to be handled?
Do you want to be Secretary of Defense? You don't have any military background,
no,
do you?
No.
Okay.
Just
well, there you go. You got the job.
Lack of knowledge and experience never stopped me from doing a job. So so count me in.
Yeah.
I'll be there.
I will say, if I was ever president, I would follow norms. Apparently, that's extreme nowadays.
Excuse me. That's how we operated under norms for so long, and then you had the current president that just blew through every stop sign. How do you get back to that? Do you I'm coughing up a lung, but do you sorry, I don't know if we can get this out of but
Get some water.
Okay. No. We'll just pick it up. Like, how do we get back where norms are followed, do they have to become laws?
Well, yeah. I mean, you could, I guess, formalize norms and make them laws, but I think you need norms to exist to some extent and to be followed for democracy to work, because you can't possibly write a law to cover everything. Single action. And then moreover, the more I read up on other countries' constitutions, you realize that the Constitution really only matters to the extent that norms are followed.
Right.
Because in the end, even constitutions are just stuff written down on paper. You could ignore it if you want. So, this is why a lot of countries that got their independence with the collapse of the Soviet Union, they write all these constitutions and it looks all democratic on paper, but the norms and the kind of established practices aren't there. So how do you get back to following norms? I mean, probably the way it's supposed to work is voters are supposed to punish people in government when they break norms.
All right.
The problem is, probably especially in the United States, but I would say in any democracy has this problem to some extent, is voters are just not very informed.
Yeah.
And even if they are informed, they maybe just don't care about norms. And that gets worse with polarization, which I believe was our last episode discussing political polarization. Is people don't care about norms anymore. As long as it's my side breaking the norms and it hurts your side, I'm okay with it. So I think, voters probably need to start paying attention. I don't know how that would work, but that's one part of the solution. Polarization needs to go away. And then short of that, I don't know. I mean, it's going to take someone to get into government and actually lead the country again.
Yeah.
And we'll see who the Democrats pick.
Yeah.
And I guess Republicans too, but.
Yeah, I think that's a big thing is public opinion. If politicians need to be punished politically for not following norms.
Yeah.
And if they're not, then there's less of an incentive to follow norms. And the way, things work in the US right now with polarization, not following a norm is going to make a very marginal impact on how public views you and your policies. That's why Trump can get away with almost anything, is because of polarization. He's just not being punished with shifting public opinion as presidents in the past would have been. And that is remarkable. Look at Trump's approval rating. The most remarkable thing about it is how it just doesn't change. It's the same all the time. It's always in that 38 to 42% range. It never changes. It started off a little bit higher, but it came down a couple months, and it's been pretty steady since then. It went down a couple points with the Iran stuff, but only a couple points. So you have to make people care about it. And I don't know, I think maybe an argument, a way of trying to make that happen is maybe if you really promote civics, for example, in school. I don't know. I was watching something on PBS a couple months ago, and they kind of made the argument that you can tie some of the reform movements we had in the post-World War II era to the fact that there was a real emphasis on trying to educate Americans about government and civics in the post-World War II period, which it's hard to prove, but may have led to a more informed electorate than then was able to push for these reforms and improve American democracy and American society. So I don't know, maybe that's another pie in the sky idea, but there is a big problem, the voters not being very well informed. And if you just, survey Americans, just things like, I don't know, who becomes president after the vice president, or who's your senator, who's a member of the House for your district. Americans don't know anything.
Do we have how do we accomplish that at Lyon? What courses do we have? We don't have a civics course, but
American experience.
American experience.
The American experience course is supposed to fit in this role. I think that's an argument why it's part of our core curriculum.
Yeah.
But also, I'm sure U.S. history as well. And maybe even world history. I think the comparative politics course is actually very useful too, where students can kind of see how politics differs country by country, and it kind of makes you realize how dysfunctional things can be sometimes in the U.S., and then maybe kind of forces you to think about solutions and ways we could maybe modify our own institutions. So, in truth, there's probably not one class, but I agree. I think it would be nice to have require civics, and at the very least, just learning the Constitution and how our government works.
Yeah, sometimes the naturalized citizens know more about our country than
they have to.
Because all of a sudden you talk to them and they know everything.
How many Americans could pass an American citizenship test? My guess is not the majority. The majority would not pass it. But that's something that is maybe a policy measure you could take. Promote more civics education. And selfishly, I'll say American history too. Education in
I
schools.
can't throw marketing in there, but I'll try.
Now, one of the big problems with that is that I think education has been devalued in recent years, where people are increasingly, skeptical of whether or not education is really necessary or worth it, especially beyond high school. I think it still is, but that's another barrier to that possible solution. But the PBS video was really interesting because I didn't really know much about this, but I guess the government just poured a lot of money into civics education after World War II, and I guess political literacy went up in the 1950s as a result, and that's a good thing. We definitely don't have that right now.
Yeah, amen. Well,
I do think it works too. Like I do this every semester. I do like a pre-test, post-test, and it's a simple 10 questions, multiple choice. And it's like just factual questions about like who's commander in chief, who has the power to declare war or, pass the budget. And I do notice like students come in and usually they get maybe I think the average is 4 out of 10 questions right.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Which is maybe slightly above if you just randomly were to pick answers. And then by the end of the semester, they're up to, I think the average is either 7 or 8 out of 10 questions correctly. So yeah, in truth, civics is not even that hard either. It's it's not that complex to just kind of read the first 3 articles of the Constitution.
And we have a very short Constitution compared to other national constitutions. It takes a long time to read it. Ours you can do in an hour, probably less than an hour.
It's kind of related to civics that what politically one of the best experience I had when I was living in the Atlanta suburbs was getting involved in city government, where I was on the planning commission and, I went to city council meetings and you actually saw government that wasn't polarized because basically there were no parties, that you were just elected to a position and your job was just to run the city well, and just everything had a function. I really, it was just seeing how, it wasn't a small city either. This was a suburb of 100,000 people. So, they had, you had all the, you had constituencies and, and everything. But I really, same thing as far as how this, you had the mayor, and the mayor had just these controls that you had to be familiar with and all the other things. So I don't know where I got off on that. I was
But you're saying you have political connections in Atlanta and maybe the wider Georgia state.
Yeah.
Which is you can get me that state
for elections.
This is what running through my mind.
I will say
I shook John Ossoff's hand once, so now we're deep close friends. So
was it a good handshake?
It was firm. Yeah, it was good. Yeah, I'll give it a solid A.
I'll say if you think Americans don't know a lot about the federal government, ask them about state and local government.
Yeah,
and it'll be much, much worse. Whatever the results are on a federal government test, state and local will be atrocious. And that even goes for me. I don't know as much about local politics as I should. I'm sure I know more than the average person does. I go vote in the primaries, local primaries, which most people don't do. But and that's kind of policy, which in many ways actually has much more effect over your life than federal policy does. Federal policy, not that it doesn't have major effects, it does, but a lot of things that affect you most directly are things being decided down the street from you, not in Washington, D.C. And I think most people overlook that.
Oh, yeah. Things that I was, there was a street and we were deciding whether to put a traffic light or a roundabout. And there's cost differences, but then you had a strong group of people that wanted neither. They wanted to keep the street because it's going to slow you down. And so then you had to hear everybody out. And you had to have the open meetings and let everybody, every Karen get up to the microphone and say her piece. And
Roundabouts are more expensive, I take it.
Yeah.
Quite a bit, is it?
Yeah.
Well, in Batesville, we had that. It was kind of a debate about the roundabout over by the community center, and the number of just adult children I saw online like whining about this was just, it was ridiculous.
Right.
Things like, I'm never gonna go to the intersection ever again. There are gonna be accidents there every single day. It's too confusing. People in Batesville can't handle it. I saw some people are like, I'm boycotting that area. What?
Yeah.
It's like the same reaction.
I didn't know this.
It was insane. And then you got the same reaction too when they put the pedestrian pathway in on Main Street, where it was like, oh, I'm not going down Main Street anymore. It's too confusing.
Boycott downtown. Oh, and then local government go and have somebody give you a proposal to build an apartment complex. Oh man, then people truly lose their minds.
People don't like change. Is the takeaway. Like generally, they don't like change.
And it's NIMBYism too. Yeah. That we had a lot of that it's going to lower property values, and it's that anti-abundance theory. So there were a lot of but that's democracy in its own way, at a very small level, and the people's voices and trying to be heard, and with all the roadblocks that what we see at the federal level, the mayor was keenly aware that she would get booted out of office if in terms of the if she went and if too many people truly opposed that apartment complex. It was badly needed, and there was a whole reason, but there was it just had such a negative connotation with the homeowners that and so you had to get past it. Ended up that the apartment complex went in and actually helped the downtown area, because all of a sudden you had all these people that could eat at the restaurants and drink at the bars, and you have the dry clean. It was a boom, but you had to get past all the negative stuff.
Yeah, that's why Batesville doesn't have another big apartment complex when it needs one. It's all the opposition to it.
Yeah.
So we have the landing, but I know housing in Batesville is very, very tight. So we probably could use another couple landings really to free up some properties.
All right. Well, anything else, guys? We're
I'm all tapped.
You're all tapped out?
I'm all tapped, yeah.
All right. Well, then I think that's a good time to end. I'll just first be thankful that, I was able to make it through the episode. Partway through, I was coughing up a lung, but was able to do a pretty quick rebound. And here we are at another conclusion of As the World Turns or Burns. We'll be back again next time, another show. We don't have to really put much of an agenda, because it seems that there's always something that, something that's turning or burning, and that pops up for us to talk. But please, like our show. Please subscribe to the show. Please tell your friends about it. We love to keep building our audience, and we love just talking about this stuff and spending time together. So until next time, take care.
This podcast is sponsored in part by Lyon College and KILT Studios. Thank you to Jonah Winter for the intro and outro music.